インタビュー。
I guess while writing Himawari House, so in your mind, did you have any complex things about three languages, Japanese, Korean, English?
Yeah, I did, especially because sometimes the way that I spoke a lot of the times with people who I spoke Japanese to, I realized a while ago that most of the people in my life who I speak Japanese to speak Japanese and one other language. Like most of the Japanese people in my life don't only speak Japanese, like they speak Japanese in English or Japanese in Spanish or Japanese in Korean. And so I would always kind of switch in the middle of the sentence if there was a word that I didn't know. And that was something that was very natural to me. And it's more difficult to do that in a book. So there were times when I would want to switch in the middle of the sentence, but it wouldn't make sense, or the editors would get really like, oh, do we have to do this? Like, can we just like make it more simple, please? I think speaking is a lot more complex than written in a way where, you know, especially when you're bilingual, sometimes you just like switch without thinking about it, but you have to think about the audience and what will make sense to them. So
I think Himawari House focuses on three people who, despite struggling with language barriers and cultural differences, right, and nurture their friendship. But personally, whether in my home country or abroad, and whether interacting with foreigners or not, I realized the importance of expressing my thoughts in words and communicate them from various angles multiple times. In this scene, I think this work resonates with everyone, regardless of their experience with language learning or living abroad. In a way, this work not only addresses overcoming the barrier of language, but also gently teaches how to overcome the barriers of the heart. What are your thoughts on this?
I hadn't thought about that before this moment, but when you said it, I realized like, oh, that's actually true, because it is, you know, Nao's insecurity is not necessarily like just the insecurity of not knowing her cultural identity. It's also just not knowing whether you have like a ibasho, like a place where you belong in general. And I have also thought about that, like maybe this character's struggle is not necessarily like if it wasn't the cultural identity, it would be something else, you know, like some other feeling of being an outsider. And I think recently I've been thinking a lot about this. I watched, what was it? There was a Netflix special recently with Hoshinogen.
Yeah.
Feeling like an alien and always feeling like you're kind of on the outside looking at people and watching them interact, but not knowing how to like enter into the interaction. And I think this is like something I've realized is very common of artists, like a feeling of being on the outside and observing. And I mean, I don't know if I would say that it's like something that's necessary, but I definitely think it's very common, like feeling of like not belonging and then using whatever method, whether it's drawing or music or comedy, to kind of transmute that feeling and kind of translate what you see into a way that you can communicate yourself, which is not necessarily always even through words. Like I said, it can be through comics, like, or through singing or whatever it may be.
So when it comes to comics, how would you explain the difference between Japanese manga and other comics?
Like it's usually black and white. I mean, if we're talking just like technical terms, like it's usually black and white. It's usually like long. It's usually, I think in general, I feel like the words are used more sparingly. And I think there's also differences between like manhwa, like Korean comics, and then American graphic novels versus like French graphic novels. But in general, I find American comics tend to use a lot more words and a lot more text, and the pictures tend to be smaller. The style tends to be kind of either more childish or more like superhero cartoony. And I think in general, like the American graphic novel or the American comics market, I think, is just now starting to take comics a little bit more seriously. Before it was very much like, this is for children or for comic book nerds. But personally, like having grown up reading manga, which is, you know, like established in Japan, that there's manga of like every genre. Like I'm literally like, I have on my table like this, like the comic show for like ryori.
Wow.
Like they have awards that are specifically for like books that are comics about food. Like there's so many genres. Like
I got
and
it.
I think it's easier to talk about like more different things and be taken more seriously in Japan. I think a more well-established medium there. When I go sometimes to like comic or to like librarian events in the United States, and they talk on panels and stuff about like, wow, I didn't know comics are such an amazing medium. And like everyone's still kind of like in this kind of phase of acting like it's like this new thing that they've never heard of. And I'm having read manga my whole life. I'm like, I just feel kind of weird about like, I can't be surprised with you because it's just something that is just very like obvious to me.
I saw your profile or any other interviews. Certainly, you were so inspired by Japanese manga, especially Hachi Mitsu to Clover. I've never read Hachi Mitsu to Clover. Of course, I know. So that's why yesterday I read only number one, only one book, but I might understood how you describe the atmosphere of Hachimitsu to Clover or Japanese comics atmosphere, especially. But concretely, do you have any tips writing while creating Himawari House, taking from Hachimitsu to Clover or Japanese as a comics manga?
Actually, while like the process of actively writing the book, I tried not to read anything new because I was afraid that I would copy too much and like start to compare my work to somebody else's work. And then I think, but before writing it as well, I think I wanted to try to read more things besides just Hachimitsu to Kurowa because, you know, I don't want to make just like a rip-off, like a complete copy. So I tried to diversify a little bit in what I read. Interestingly, because I haven't really gone back and revisited that series in a long time, but yesterday I started rereading another one, which is Umimachi Diary.
I see.
And I realized like, oh, I think I really also stole a lot from this series, just from the dynamic between these like three main characters who are sisters. And it's also like a series where they're like living in a house and it's just like daily life kind of occurrences. But yeah, I think I try not to read too much when I'm actively creating because I know that I'm insecure and that I'm going to I'll read something and then I'll look at my work and I'll think,
right.
I try not to do that to myself.
Anyway, so now you are cartoonist, illustrator, animator. Honestly, I saw your profile. So who are you? So, I mean, of course, you are a cartoonist, illustrator, or animator, or so every job, every work, but I mean, which is the most focusing job for you? Of course, everything is okay, but I wonder.
I mean, right now is comics. I don't know how it'll be in the future. I don't want to kind of define myself by one thing. But yeah, it's definitely been the one that I think at this point I'm the most proficient in. And I feel like it's the easiest for me to express myself in that way. Although, I mean, when I was younger, I definitely had like dreams of becoming like the next Miyazaki. And I mean, who knows if I will ever have like that kind of opportunity. But I do have like dreams of things that I would like to do. And I would like to paint more and kind of also explore different ways of creating that are not necessarily like creating a piece of work, but like creating also like connections between people and creating spaces and those sorts of things. But yeah, right now it's like comics.
In your field, who do you think is currently the best creator in the world?
Creator of comics?
Yeah.
Oh, that's hard. Well, like my like current idol, Igarashi Daisuke, is definitely like my idol right now.
Why do you think so?
Both like the artistic style and also the themes that he explores. Every time I read his works, I feel kind of like very moved and like almost like spiritually shaken in a way that is very rare, I think. I mean, I aspire to create things that are like, I think moves me the most about his work is that it feels very big, like, and it just feels like he's he has some kind of connection to like some other dimension, and he's like receiving messages from ghosts or something. And it's every time I read his work, I'm just blown away.
いつも、インタビューをご視聴いただいてありがとうございます。この度スタートしたメンバーシップでは、各界のトップランナーから戦争体験者に至るまで2000人以上にインタビューしてきた僕が、国内外の取材、そして旅の中で、見つけた人生をアップデートするコンテンツをお届けしていきたいと思います。ここでしか聞けない特別インタビューや秘蔵トークにもアクセスしていただけます。随時これは面白い、これはいいんじゃないかというコンテンツも、アップデートしていきますので、そちらも含めてどうか今後の展開を楽しみにしていただけたらと思います。なお、いただいた、皆様からのメンバーシップのこの会費はですね、インタビューシリーズの制作費だったり、国内外のインタビューに伴う交通費、宿泊費、その他、取材の諸々の活動経費に使わせていただきたいと思っています。最後になぜ、僕が無料で、インタビューを配信し続けるのか少しだけお話しさせてください。この一番の理由はですね、僕自身が、人の話によってうつや幾度の困難から救われてきたからです。そして何より、国内外のたくさんの視聴者の方からこれまで人生が変わりました、前に進む勇気をもらいました、救われましたという声をいただき続けてきたからに他なりません。この声は、世界が、コロナ禍に見舞われた2020年頃から、一層増えたように思います。これは本当に、ありがたいことです。ただ同時に、それだけ、心身ともに疲弊したり不安を抱えたりしている方が増えていることに他ならない、その裏返しであると僕は強く感じています。正直に言えば僕自身も15年以上前に起業して以来、最大のピンチと言っても過言ではない時期を、この数年送り続けてきました。でもこんな時だからこそ守りに入ることなくインスピレーションと学びにあふれるまだ見ぬインタビューを、送り続けることが、インタビュアーとしての、自分の使命なのではないかと強く感じています。世界がますます混迷を極め先の見えない時代だからこそ、僕はインタビューの力を信じています。これまでのようにトップランナーや戦争体験者の方への取材はもちろん、今後は僕たちと同じ姿勢の人、普通の人の声に耳を傾けたり、ややもすると内向きになってしまう今こそ海外でのインタビューに力を入れていきたいと思っています。そして彼らの一つ一つの声を音声や映像だけでなく、本としてもしっかりと残していきたい、そう考えています。そんな思いに共感してくださる方が、このメンバーシップの一員になってくださったらこれほど心強く、そして嬉しいことはありません。ぜひメンバーシップの方でも、皆様とお耳にかかれるのを楽しみにしています。以上、早川洋平でした。